Look right at the camera and do not blink. Because what I am about to drop on you is going to completely shatter every single narrative the mainstream networks have been feeding you for the past 3 weeks. Forget everything you heard about peace talks. Forget the neat little press conferences with politicians smiling and shaking hands in expensive suits. My phone has been literally vibrating off my desk all night with encrypted messages from sources I absolutely cannot name, and I am still shaking from what I just read. The official story is a complete and utter fabrication. A shiny distraction to keep you from realizing that the entire globe was exactly 90 seconds away from total, absolute obliteration. Let me say that again so it sinks in. 90 seconds. We are being spoon-fed this highly polished, completely sterilized version of a diplomatic victory. But the reality is, we are all locked inside a speeding car with no brakes watching the people in charge fight over the steering wheel. I need to get this truth out into the ether before the government scrubs the entire timeline and makes this whole nightmare disappear into a classified vault forever. Here is the ultimate highly classified tea. We have 3 American guided missile destroyers. We are talking about the USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason, $3 billion floating fortresses. On May 7th, they were moving through the Strait of Hormuz and they were not picking a fight. They were not running some aggressive hostile drill. They were just transiting, passing through an international waterway that legally belongs to the world. But you have to genuinely understand the geography of this place to understand the absolute sheer terror of what happened. This is not the open ocean where you can see for miles and maneuver freely. At its absolute best, the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide, but the actual navigable shipping channels, the parts where these massive ships can actually float without running aground, are barely 2 miles across in each direction. You are essentially threading a microscopic needle with a billion-dollar warship, while a heavily armed, extremely motivated adversary is sitting right on the shoreline, basically breathing down your neck. So under the cover of this absolute joke of a ceasefire that everyone supposedly agreed to in mid-April, the United States launched Project Freedom. They were trying to rescue the thousands of massive commercial merchant ships that were literally trapped in the Persian Gulf. Because weeks prior, Iran had basically just snapped its fingers and frozen 1/5 of the global oil supply overnight. The economic panic was silent, but it was real. Normal people paying at the pump had no idea that a handful of guys in fast boats half a world away were the reason they could barely afford to get to work. And then the absolute unthinkable happened. Without a single warning on the radio, without a shred of provocation, Iran just opened fire. And I do not mean they took a random potshot. I do not mean some rogue commander got trigger happy. They unleashed an absolute synchronized hellstorm. A highly coordinated multi-domain attack aimed at all 3 American destroyers at the exact same fraction of a second. I am talking low-flying cruise missiles skimming just above the waves, so they are completely invisible to radar until the last possible second. I am talking swarms of those cheap, terrifying suicide drones buzzing overhead like metal locusts, and heavily armed fast attack boats tearing across the water at insane speeds simultaneously. They designed this to completely overwhelm the American defensive systems. They wanted to overload the computers. They wanted blood in the water. They wanted a burning American ship sinking to the bottom of the Gulf, and they threw everything they had at making it happen. I need to just pause for a second here. Give me a second. Look, I honestly feel physically sick even thinking about this next part, because there were completely innocent civilian merchant crews caught right in the middle of this nightmare. Just ordinary guys, sailors on cargo ships hauling completely boring stuff. Guys who just wanted to finish their contract and go back home to their kids. And suddenly they are trapped on these huge, slow metal targets in the middle of a literal exploding war zone. They had no armor. They had no weapons. They were just sitting ducks while military warships are tearing the actual sky apart all around them. It is so unbelievably dark, and it honestly breaks my heart that the media is completely ignoring the sheer human terror those civilians went through. Just trapped on the water waiting for a stray missile to end everything. It is just so deeply messed up. But let us get back to the American ships, because this is where the story gets so crazy. It feels like a movie script they would reject for being too unrealistic. These Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are equipped with something called the Aegis Combat System. It is basically an artificial intelligence brain that tracks targets. And in that moment, that system had to process dozens of incoming lethal threats in a fraction of a second. Missiles coming from the coast, drones falling from the clouds, boats swarming the hull, all converging at different speeds and different altitudes. If even one of those threats leaked through the defense net, we are talking about hundreds of young American sailors losing their lives instantly and the immediate, irreversible start of World War III. But every single attack failed. 0 hits. Not one. The defense was flawless and horrifying to witness. The outer layer of interceptor missiles tore into the sky and took out the long-range threats miles away. The electronic warfare system spun up and just completely blinded the incoming drones, sending them crashing into the waves like blind birds. And for the stuff that actually got terrifyingly close, the radar-guided cannons, those massive guns that shoot thousands of rounds a minute, shredded the rest into metal confetti just seconds before impact. The water was literally raining fire and shrapnel. And this is where the entire official timeline gets blown completely to pieces. The Navy did not just sit there and absorb the hit and write a sternly worded letter. The American answer came in exactly 90 seconds. 90 seconds from the moment the radar locked onto the incoming swarm. The United States Central Command bypassed all the red tape, ignored all the diplomatic hand-wringing, and authorized a massive, catastrophic wave of retaliatory strikes. But they did not just shoot back at the guys on the beach who pushed the launch buttons. Oh no. The response package reached from the dusty southern Iranian coastline, all the way to the heart of Tehran itself. They bypassed the low-level operatives completely and sent precision munitions screaming straight into the command and control facilities, and the intelligence hubs that were actually orchestrating the swarm attack. The spokespeople are up on their podiums telling you this was a measured self-defense strike to protect American troops. A careful tactical response to maintain the ceasefire. But you guys, you do not launch stealth strikes deep into a sovereign capital city unless you are sending a deeply violent personal message. The diplomats are sitting in luxury hotels in Oman right now begging for a 60-day extension on a ceasefire that literally does not even exist anymore. And meanwhile, American F-18 Super Hornets are aggressively blowing the smokestacks straight off Iranian oil tankers in the middle of the ocean to enforce a total brutal naval blockade. It is all smoke and mirrors, every single bit of it. Everyone is smiling for the cameras talking about de-escalation, while literally tearing each other apart in the shadows. It is a terrifying dual reality, and the public is only being allowed to see the sanitized version. We are living in an era of absolute manufactured consent where the people making the actual decisions are keeping you completely in the dark about how close we are to the edge of the cliff. They want you arguing about petty domestic politics while they are out there trading ballistic missiles in the dark. The amount of coordination required to cover up an escalation of this magnitude is staggering. Dozens of agencies coordinating their public relations spin, making sure nobody leaks the true radar logs, making sure the sailors on those destroyers sign non-disclosure agreements thicker than a phone book. But here is the thing. Here is the final explosive detail that my absolute highest-level military sources finally gave me late last night, after I literally begged them for the truth. And I am still vibrating just saying this out loud to you guys. They are not telling you why the retaliatory strikes reached all the way into Tehran. It was not just random infrastructure or empty radar dishes. The intelligence hubs the United States struck 90 seconds later were the exact highly encrypted bunker rooms where the absolute highest commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard were physically sitting. They were in those rooms watching the live high-definition feeds from their drones. They were literally eating snacks and watching what they thought was going to be the catastrophic sinking of an American destroyer on a massive flat-screen monitor. The United States Navy tracked the data link from the explosive drones screaming toward their ships, traced that digital signal back through the encrypted networks, straight back to the capital city, and dropped the absolute roof on those commanders while they were still looking at the screens. The United States did not just defend their ships against a random attack. They looked the Iranian high command dead in the eye through their own drone cameras and pulled the plug on them in real time. They eliminated the architects of the attack while the attack was still happening. And they are burying this, completely desperately burying this, because if the world actually knew we just vaporized their top brass during an active, supposedly peaceful negotiation, the entire region would be locked in an uncontrollable, raging firestorm by midnight. Stay incredibly vigilant, trust absolutely nothing they tell you on the official channels, and keep watching this space, because the cracks in their story are only getting bigger.